You are listening to the Cookbook Love podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 407.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. How's everybody doing today? All is well here in my cookbook bunker. I'm recording this episode in the middle of the afternoon, which is unusual for me, but I've taken my walk. In the summertime, I take it a little bit earlier, done some work, sent some emails, and now taking time to record this episode because we are headed to a family wedding later in the week, and I wanted to get this in the hopper for Scott to process and get out to you. One thing that is so beneficial for me to have direct communication with people who want to write cookbooks through my Facebook group and through my email list is having you ask me questions, things that you are concerned about, things you're curious about. And one of the things that cookbook writers recently have asked me is if they are going to go into debt writing a book. So I thought it'd be fun today to revisit the topic of cost of writing a cookbook. And there's 7 different areas that you have to think about when you think about the cost. And I'm going to go through each of those, offer you some options for different costs that you might incur, and help you to see what the total cost and then the benefit, of course, of writing a cookbook might be. So let's start with number 1. This is the writing of the book or the writing of the proposal. The neat thing about writing itself and the act of writing is it is a very low-cost activity from a money perspective. I don't have to pay anything to sit down with a pen or a notebook, sit down with Google Docs, and actually write. The cost that many people incur when they want to sit down to write is not the actual materials, but just getting themselves to sit in the chair and do the work of writing. And your presence in that chair is important because you, again, create a container that you are working in to write whatever it is you need to write. But Google Docs is free. Writing is free. You might have to if you use a notebook, buy a notebook. You might need to buy a pen, or you might need to find a pen that works. But the real cost is creating the space in your life to actually write. Notebooks are not that expensive. You can get some nice spiral notebooks for a couple of dollars. And if you want to buy a box of 12 blue or black Bic stick pens, you can get 12 of those for less than $10 and write your little heart out. And I highly encourage this. I think it's a terrific way to start your day. I write every morning, not always for publication, but to clear my mind, to be intentional. And I've mentioned this many times on the show, using the inspiration from Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, her methodology called Morning Pages. But writing itself is free. Okay, so just remember that. The cost, again, is getting yourself to sit down and do it, and the space of your life that will not be able to be reclaimed during the time that you have been writing, but hopefully it will be fruitful and prove to provide you with something that you can publish. All right, second cost is the food. Now, one thing I want you to see is that you are already eating something every day. You may not be cooking every day, but you're probably already spending money on ingredients. You're probably already spending money on coffee or baked goods. And money is already being spent somewhere shopping for food and eating. So I like to think that my cost to actually write a cookbook did not go up when it came to the food because I was already spending money on food somehow anyway. If you want to write a book that is very different from what you're currently spending on food and eating, then yes, you may incur more cost to write about that. But why would you write about something that you're not currently doing and that you're not currently living? My suggestion is that you start writing about what you are already eating today, what you're already drinking today, about the ingredients you're already buying right now, this week, and what you're already spending money on anyway. Write about that. Write about how much you spend, how you might be able to save money, how you might be able to make different menus with what you have on hand. But that's one way to ensure that you're not going to spend any more money on food, is to write about what you're already cooking and eating right now. And that's exactly what I did with my very first cookbook, and I got a book deal. And the book is still in print, and I used exactly what I was cooking or baking every day for my family as the main outline and foundation of that book. What that meant then is, even when it came time to test the recipes and to write them and to develop them, I just used the time that I was already cooking dinner for them to be the time that I would work on documenting my recipe, writing everything down, keeping track of what I was doing during the time I was actually already cooking. Okay, so that's $0 spent, because $0 more dollars spent, I should say, because if you're already cooking or baking, you're spending the money anyway. And if you're not making any different food, then it's not like you're buying new ingredients and bringing them into the house. So the truth of the matter is yes, there are food costs involved in writing a cookbook, but you're already spending money anyway. So there shouldn't be a huge increase in the amount that you're spending. Now, I'm going to talk about Photography Day in a minute, and I'm going to talk a little bit about testing in a minute. But for the actual writing of the recipes for the book, write about what you're already eating, drinking, preparing in your kitchen right now, and you will have no increase in your costs. Number 3, if you want a book deal, pitching an idea to a publisher or an agent is free. They don't charge you to send them your ideas. It's 100% free, no cost. The upside of that is you could get a book deal. And if you get a book deal, they will send you money for your book idea because they want to partner with you to create the book. You write the book, they produce it. The publisher would send you an advance of royalties, which is a way to make money off of writing a cookbook. Now, if you decide that you want to contract with an agent and they represent you to publishers, they generally charge about 15% of what you earn from the publisher. So if you get an advance, let's just say for round numbers, $1,000, they would get $150 and you would get $850. Okay. You're still going to make $850. You just give the $150 to the agent and they will help you find the publisher that you want. Some people love working with agents, helps them to negotiate their contract. They gets them in the door to publishers that do not accept unsolicited proposals from authors. But pitching the idea to them is free. There is zero cost involved. Number 4, signing a book deal is free. In fact, in many cases, like I just mentioned, the publisher is going to send you an advance of royalties to use while you write the book manuscript. Okay. If you decide that you would like to have someone review your contract for you and you do not have an agent, you can join the Authors Guild. And one of the services they provide to authors is reviewing literary contracts. So membership in the Authors Guild is something that would have a cost attached to it. So for emerging writers who have not yet published a book, the cost to join the Authors Guild is $135 a year. It's a pretty good deal, and you can get contract review from them for your cookbook deal contract that you get from the publisher. I think the thing to remember about that is that it's probably cheaper than cheaper than a lawyer. And if you're going to find a lawyer, you maybe know someone that can review contracts, but I highly recommend you find someone who's used to reviewing book contracts. But I think that's $135 well spent. So up till now, we haven't had any new costs incurred except for perhaps joining the Authors Guild if you decide to do that. Number 5 is when you work with a traditional publisher, they cover the cost of editing the book, designing the book, printing the book, and distributing the book. So to you, the author, there is zero cost. Photography, we're going to talk about in a minute. But editing, design, printing, and distribution, $0 out of your pocket. And that's one of the biggest benefits of traditional publishing, in my opinion, is if you do not want to be a publisher and set up a publishing business, partnering with someone who runs a publishing business is an excellent opportunity to have a beautiful book created that you don't have to actually create the book. And there is no cost to you. And in fact, like I mentioned before, they'll pay you in advance of royalties, hopefully, to write the book. And you actually have a little bit of income to cover the cost while you're writing the book of your time. Okay, number 6, the book index. I did pay several $100s to have the index created for my first book. But I then learned that publishers could create the index if you asked them to in the contract. And you can take that out of the contract and ask them to create the index. If you don't want them to create your index and you're willing to pay for it, you could find an indexer to create the index. And I recommend one of the places you might look is the Society of Indexers. You can search specifically for people who index cookbooks. That's a little bit of a different beast. You imagine it's like maybe indexing another work of nonfiction or a textbook, but it's nice to find somebody who actually has experience in the cookbook or food book world. And you can search by type of book on the Society of Indexers. So it's possible that you maybe will incur that cost. But again, remember, if you don't want to pay for it, you could negotiate that as one of the terms of your deal in your cookbook contract. So let's talk about photography. Number 7, photography is an expense of the book, but you do not have to do the photography yourself. In fact, if you choose to traditionally publish, it's probably better that you let a food photographer take care of the photography for your book. If you already are a food photographer and you have equipment, then you could take the photographs for your book, but since you already have the equipment, it's actually a good use of your equipment. There is no additional cost incurred. I'm not a photographer. I did not want to be a photographer, and many of my students are the same. They're not photographers and they don't want to be. So the publisher could pay for the photographer, which they did for my first 3 books, and they paid for the illustrator for one of my books. So there were no costs for me incurred. It's possible part of my advance went toward paying that photographer, but I consider the advance to be an advance of royalties. So the fact that they were willing to pay for the photographer, that was fine with me because I knew that I didn't want to do it. And I did get say in the people that were hired to do the photos for my book. So photography is a big expense of the book, but you do not have to do it, and you often do not have to pay for it. Okay. So that's my little spiel about photography. Don't expect that you're going to have to pay for the photos. It's something you can talk about with your publisher and find out if it's something that they're going to pay for or you're going to pay for. So those are the expenses that really you maybe would incur if you had a book deal, but you actually aren't going to incur that many expenses. The writing, again, is free. You're already cooking or baking anyway, so you shouldn't have any more food costs. Pitching a book to a publisher is free. Pitching an idea to an agent for representation is free. Signing a book deal is free. Getting your contract reviewed if you join the Authors Guild might be $135. When you work with a traditional publisher, they cover editing, designing, printing, and distribution of the book. And if you need to have your index created, you could invest several $100s in having that done, or the publisher could pay for it if it's negotiated in the contract. And then you need to have a photography conversation. Photography for me was free, and the illustrations for my book were free. They were covered by the publisher. So when I say free, I don't mean that nobody paid the photographer or the illustrator. That's not true. It just did not come out of my own pocket. So then people say, well, if I'm not going to go into debt writing the book, is it worth it to write the book? Well, that's up to everybody to decide for themselves. I gained huge benefits of monetary reward and just impact reward from writing my books. And if you go back to episode 392, I talked about the 25 unexpected benefits of writing a cookbook. Number one, when I committed to do this and to become an author, I learned how to lead myself. I learned how to make decisions. I learned how to write better. I learned how to increase my belief that publishers wanted people to pitch to them. I learned perseverance, how to stick with something once I started. I learned how to get myself into a chair to write. I learned how to keep going and not quit. I overcame any self-doubt that I had, that what I cooked or baked every day was enough to create the content for a cookbook. I created benefit out in the world, way beyond myself and my own family, impacting thousands of cooks. Even as we speak, families who are eating together more, people who are learning how to feed themselves better, all because of the books that I wrote. And I did get advances on my books. The books have gone on to sell. Some of them have earned out their advances, so I'm getting royalty checks. And the benefit even beyond that from a cost perspective is the online courses, the online classes, the online coaching that I now do as a result of investing the time and energy into writing these books, becoming a published author, and now helping other people to write cookbook proposals, get representation from an agent, get a book deal from a publisher without an agent, and the things that I'm able to help people like you do have had monetary rewards for me also. But I think the impact that we make on families and on people, and more people feeding themselves, people healing, learning, having fun in the kitchen, those are really the things that I think are cost and benefits that are hard to put a number on, hard to put a monetary number on. So no, you will not go into debt writing a cookbook. If you hybrid publish a book, which means that you pay the publisher to publish your book, I highly recommend that you not do that unless you have a large outlet or place where you know your books are going to sell. And they're going to sell enough copies to cover the cost of the publishing plus more. Do you have a very popular bakery? Do you have a very high-end wine room? Do you do public speaking where you sell books at the back of the room? Do you have a market that's very popular? Because when you publish with a hybrid publisher, they are going to publish a book that's very high quality that looks like a traditionally published cookbook, but you do pay the cost up front. So that's not the type of publishing I'm specifically talking about today, but people could go into debt for hybrid publishing and not make their money back if they're not careful about the deal that they get. So that's my one disclaimer on this particular episode is if you are working with a publisher that wants you to pay them, use caution. Ask questions and be sure that you know the point at which you would break even or start earning money over and above the cost you get to get published. So I think the question is, how much of your time are you willing to invest in the project? How much energy are you willing to invest? How much commitment do you have to do this project? How much love do you have for the process of writing and for the people that you can help? Those are the things that I think are not monetary costs, but actually have a cost attached to them, because time and energy are really just another name or way to think about money. And so is commitment, depending on what you have going on in your life. And so is love. It's all related to energy. And that, in a roundabout way, is connected also to money. So let me talk about the platform side of cookbook writing when it comes to the things that you need to do in addition to writing a proposal to get a book deal. Email list is one of the most important assets you can build, that you can stay in regular communication with your readers. You can find email service providers that are free or free to up to a number of email addresses. As your email list starts to grow, you're probably going to incur some costs, but initially many are free. MailChimp, for example, is a free email service provider, and it's easy to get your MailChimp service provider connected to your website or connected to a landing page where you're giving away a lead magnet. So there shouldn't be a lot of costs involved with that. If you need to create a lead magnet to attract people to your email list, you can use Canva. You can use the basic level of Canva. It's free to use that. Create a really nice lead magnet, something that really helps people and encourages them to give you their email address. This is called direct response marketing. They give you their email address, and in return, you offer them a free PDF or something that can maybe help solve a problem in their life. And then writing emails on a regular basis is also free. I highly recommend you have a little welcome sequence set up to welcome them to your email list, deliver the lead magnet to them, and then create an email for them on a regular basis. I have heard that there's a potential that every active email address that you have on your list could be worth $1 per email address per month, which means if you have 1,000 people on an email list, that could potentially be worth $1,000. If you have 5,000 people on an email list, it could potentially per month be worth $5,000. That, of course, is if you're making offers to them. So email lists are an asset, and we invest time to build assets like an email list. We invest time to write cookbooks, to write a cookbook, which is also an asset. So the cost for these two things, again, is time. Time to post on social media. If you want to schedule your social media post, you can use something like Buffer, which is free. If you want to create your post in Canva, that's also free. Instagram is free to use. Facebook is free to use. But the difference between those two is they can control who sees the content that you put out there. Whereas with an email list, it's not like that. It's generally everybody that is on your email list could receive your email into their inbox, and they can read it there. Email is a very direct communication tool with your people on your platform or on your list. I'm trying to think what parts of the platform actually would have a cost attached to them. Mainly, as your email list grows, you will start to incur costs for having a bigger list. I pay for ActiveCampaign, which is where I run my email list from, and I do pay them for the number of subscribers that I have. But that would not be something that you would incur in the very beginning. You might pay to have a website hosted. You might pay for a domain name. Those are costs that you would incur related to your website. But the actual cost of writing the book and starting to write your cookbook proposal is very, very low. And I wanted to do this episode so that you know that costs don't have to hold you back. Costs are not something that I think are a reasonable reason not to write a cookbook, at least in the very beginning. And the potential upside for what you could earn from the cookbook and what you could create in your own life and in the life of your family and in the life of people you don't even know is a very positive upside. So I hope that I have encouraged you to think today about expenses and costs in a way that you can see that it's an investment of your time. It's an investment of your energy. It does not have to be a large expense to be a cookbook writer, and you can reap great rewards from it. And then for the platform building side, it's you reap rewards from that also. Not only perhaps using your email list to show that you have an engaged readership, but continuing to stay in touch with your email list and creating products, courses, or programs to sell to your email list after your cookbook comes out. So if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own and you want to shape a publishable cookbook concept in 30 minutes, where you clarify who your cookbook is for, turn your expertise into a publishable concept, and then use this concept as the foundation for a cookbook proposal, you can head on over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/concept map to turn your expertise into a book. And you can link that also below in the show notes. So that is it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, I hope you all have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.